the two superstars. We'll start things off with Ben Simmons. He had a lot of flaws exposed in the series, especially on the offensive side, as evidenced by his 1-point performance in Game 2, which leads us to our first big number. He posted a plus-minus of -63, the worst mark of any player on either team. Not only that, but Philly outscored the Celtics by 48 points in the 63 minutes that Simmons was not on the floor. Jalen, what do you make of this?
I love Ben Simmons. He has a terrific future ahead of him. He's a franchise-changing player, a terrific passer, great size, great athleticism. I think one of the things people underestimated that he can run really fast, for whatever that's worth. But
I don't know what it's worth.
The one thing—
Do you get points for it?
The game is so very hard when you can't shoot.
Yeah.
It is so tough. And I said this when he got drafted, and a lot of people gave me flack for this. I think Ben Simmons shoots with the wrong hand.
You did.
How does he not know that by now?
I watch so much basketball. When he drives to the basket, look, when it's contested and he's going to the basket, he shoots with his right hand. That lets me know. When it's 18 seconds and he gets an offensive rebound, you're under duress. You're going to go to your strength. He shoots with his right hand. But when he goes to the free throw line, he's shooting with his left hand. I think that's something that has to get corrected. That's one. Two, when you can't shoot at all with range, now we can guard you with anybody. We can guard you with a small guy to get underneath you, like a Marcus Smart or a Terry Rozier, or even a Jaylen Brown.
You could put me on him.
Correct.
Because I know you're not going to make it, so it's
or
fine.
a big that can sag off and use their size because they're used to going against powerful guys. Like Al Horford can guard him. Morris can guard him. So that big flaw in his game was exposed in this series.
The thing that I don't fully understand, and maybe this is just furthering the genius of Brad Stevens, is how underexposed that seems to have been all year. He was a transformational player. He was phenomenal against Miami.
He's probably going to be
the rookie of the year. He's the guy people are saying is the next Magic Johnson, the next LeBron. All of a sudden, after 5 games against Brad Stevens, he has a hole in his game the size of the Grand Canyon, and you're talking about him shooting with the wrong hand. How did it take this long for the world to figure that out?
Because the further you advance, the more you get scouted. The more teams aren't playing back-to-backs. They're not playing 4 games in 5 nights. They can literally zone in on your strengths and on your weaknesses. And now if I have the talent to execute a game plan, Miami just didn't have the bodies. They knew he couldn't shoot, but they didn't have the bodies to force him to stay perimeter-oriented. The Boston Celtics have the bodies to do so, and that got exposed in this series.
Well, we're not piling on Ben. These are just the facts, but we have another big number.
Look at this.
It's the lack of range that came back to bite him. 23 of 35 attempts in the restricted area, went 5 for 24 on all other shots, Jalen.
So
I know he has to improve it, but how?
Just think about this, Michelle Beadle. He made 5 shots, in the paint.
Yeah.
He missed all 4 shots mid-range. And you know what's not pictured?
That's only 4.
He didn't attempt a 3.
Right, it's not even on there.
That's not even on. That's actually the biggest statistic. When you're a point guard, your primary ball handler does not shoot with range, it suppresses your offense. That's just the bottom line. That's why T.J. McConnell, when he started getting minutes, it put him on the wing. Look at him now in the post. Look at him now receiving the basketball versus being a distributor, because when you can't shoot, it really suppresses your offense.
And there's one other thing. You point out how they turned to McConnell. Who they did not turn to was the #1 pick in the draft. Not once. They didn't give it one try during the entire thing. I mean, I understand that people still think that Fultz has a bright future, speaking of guys who can't shoot. And I don't mean to make fun of him, but that was clearly the problem here. But, I mean, does that send up a red flag? Like, McConnell opens up the floor for them, but Markelle Fultz can't get 1 minute in a 5-game series?
That's head-scratching to me. And I saw how it happened with Jahlil Okafor when he was in Philly. It seemed like he played well. And then once they got Ben Simmons, it's like he was getting DNPs, and before you know it, he's just ostracized and shipped off. For Markelle Fultz, the other confusing thing, when he played, he actually had a triple-double.
I don't understand.
It's not like that he didn't show anything. So for me, for him not to even get an opportunity to play when you're going against a team that you just traded Tatum to get Fultz, and Tatum is out there balling, and you gave up a pick,
and
the guy that you received in return to take #1 is getting DNP. That just fascinates me. So when you talk about the process, you got to think about they have a big offseason. Okay, we know about Simmons, we know about Embiid, franchise-changing players. They have Covington, who I really like, is a knockdown shooter. Bellinelli's a free agent. Ilyasova's a free agent. J.J. Redick's a free agent. They're not playing the number 1 pick. So there's a lot of questions for a team that has 1 first-round pick and 5 second-round picks. They do have cap space.
They have Joel Embiid, you mentioned. We're going to shift gears to him. He was 1 for 5 in the fourth quarter. He had some key misses in the closing seconds of this game, which leads us to our next big number. He missed 2 potential game-tying shots in the final minute of Game 5. For the season, he was 0 for 8 on game-tying or go-ahead shots in the final minute, tied for the most misses without a make in the NBA all season. Jalen, how concerned are you about that?
Usually big men aren't the ones that you feed late in the basketball game because normally they don't create for those around them. Now, there have been exceptions to the rule, like a Hakeem Olajuwon, who can dribble, he can handle, and he can shoot. Tim Duncan was an exception. You double team, he'll kick it out. For Joel Embiid, being 0 for 8 is not an alarming stat for me, to be honest. It just shows me that they don't have a perimeter primary ball handler that they want shooting the ball, which in normal circumstances would be Ben Simmons.
Right.
So now you can say, why don't they give it to Redick? Why don't they give it to Bellinelli? Why don't they give it to Ilyasova? Because they can't create. You know who gets lost in all of this? Saric.
Who had a great night.
He can ball.
Right.
He can shoot the 3. He can create his own shot. Like that threesome of Simmons, Embiid, and Saric, like I wouldn't break that up. And so when you see Embiid struggling late, it's not so alarming for me because he is a young player. He's in the playoffs for the first time, and they're now going to him as a big, and we normally don't see that.
Again, the third member of the Big Three is not the guy who was picked number 1 overall. I don't mean to keep harping on that, but it is
that will
jarring.
Be a big story.
But let me just put all those numbers that Beetle just gave you together. When we come out of this season now, and Embiid just said we have a bright future, and certainly logic would suggest they have an extraordinarily bright future. Did we see enough little holes in the game of both Embiid and Simmons here that concern you that they are going forward 2 guys who are going to build a championship team around? Those 2 guys, put the pieces around them, they're going to win a title.
I think those guys have what it takes to be franchise-changing players, but I threw this question out, and Beto knows where I'm going. I've been throwing this question out for 3 to 6 months. Whose future would you rather have, the Celtics or the Sixers? And the reason why I did that is because I know people play the hits. The 2 best players are Embiid and Simmons. Embiid has a magnetic personality, so therefore people are going to gravitate to them. But then I'm looking at the Celtics like, wait a minute, they have picks. If you ask the Celtics owner who's his most valuable asset in his franchise, he's going to say Danny Ainge. If you ask Danny Ainge his most valuable asset, he's going to say Brad Stevens. So that collection of individuals put together a roster for the future. So I'm not worried about Philadelphia being a part of the ascension in the East because they will be a part of the conversation. But Boston showed they on a whole nother level when they beat you without Kyrie and Gordon Hayward.
The entire season has been an amazing resume for Boston. Meanwhile,